There are moments when it feels like your whole world collapses in silence, not with a bang, but with the slow fading of presence, the absence of messages, the unanswered calls, and in that silence, a woman sits, surrounded by the ruins of something she thought would last, a relationship, a promise, a home built on shared dreams, and yet, all that remains are memories that echo louder than words. It feels like loss, like the heart has been torn from the chest and replaced with a hollow ache. But what if what you think is loss is actually the beginning of your becoming? Sometimes, when the house we built falls apart, we find something under the rubble, something ancient, something forgotten, a part of us that's been waiting, a key to a door we never dared to open. That door leads home, not to him, but to yourself. When a woman loves deeply, she often forgets to bring herself along. Piece by piece, she gives away her time, her voice, her softness, until one day she looks in the mirror and barely recognizes the woman staring back, not because she's aged, but because she's been living for someone else's needs. Her own reflection got buried beneath the need to be loved, and when he leaves, the pain feels unbearable, not just because he's gone, but because he was carrying a part of her identity with him, her worth, her place in the world, her sense of being wanted. His absence becomes a mirror she never asked to look into, one that reflects not rejection, but the space she stopped filling in her own life. Louise Hay said, "You have the power to heal your life, and you need to know that. And sometimes, that power only awakens in the silence after goodbye. You may think you've been left behind, but what if the universe isn't punishing you? What if it's protecting you? What if this isn't the end of your story, but the beginning of your return?" Clarissa Pinkola Estes once wrote, "The woman who returns to herself returns to the wild." This is not about losing a man. This is about remembering the wilderness you once called home, before the fear, before the compromises, before the quiet erasure of your needs. This is where the true journey begins. Not out there in someone else's arms, but in here, where your heartbeat whispers truths you stopped listening to. You are not being abandoned. You are being invited to come back, to remember, to rise. And so we begin, not with answers, but with a quiet knowing. You're not losing him. You're finding your true self. The grief of self-abandonment, masquerading as missing him. There's a certain ache that lingers after he walks away. It's not loud. It's not always dramatic. It's quiet, like the slow drip of a faucet in an empty kitchen at night. And that ache tells you he's gone. But what if that ache isn't really about him? What if what you miss is actually you? Because sometimes, the heartbreak we feel isn't about losing someone else. It's about waking up to the silence we've kept inside for too long, the silence of abandoning our own voice, the silence of putting someone else's needs before our own, again and again, until there's nothing left but echoes of the woman we once were. You think you're grieving him, but perhaps what you're really grieving is the version of yourself that kept waiting to be chosen, the one who kept hoping that love would arrive if she was good enough, patient enough, quiet enough, the one who kept shrinking, adjusting, compromising, just to keep someone close. Louise Hay reminds us, "I love and approve of myself. I am enough." But when you live years believing you are not, his departure becomes more than a breakup. It becomes a collapse of self-worth, a shattering of a story where love only arrives through sacrifice. And still, even in that grief, there is truth, because the pain that rises in his absence isn't about him alone. It's about the pieces of yourself you stopped tending to, the dreams you paused, the desires you muted, the instincts you ignored, just to keep peace. That emptiness? It's not just about missing him. It's about missing the version of you who once dreamed without fear, laughed without waiting for approval, loved herself without conditions. You feel like something vital is gone, and you're right. But it wasn't taken by him. It was placed quietly on a shelf, over time, while you were too busy loving someone else to notice your own fading reflection. So if it hurts, let it hurt. But let it hurt for the right reasons. Let it show you where you left yourself behind. Let it guide you, not back to him, but back to the parts of you that you forgot to keep alive. The pattern of becoming who he needed, not who you are. There's a slow erosion that happens when a woman starts changing herself to be loved. At first, it seems harmless. Maybe you speak a little softer, laugh a little more, bend your schedule to match his. But over time, these small adjustments become a mask. And one day, you realize you don't know where the mask ends, and where your real face begins. You didn't mean to disappear. You just wanted love to stay. But when love demands that you edit your truth, when it rewards silence and punishes needs, it stops being love. It becomes a performance, a test you keep trying to pass, even though you were never the one who failed. There's grief in this too. The grief of watching yourself become the woman he needs, while the woman you are sits quietly in the background, waiting for her turn to speak, waiting to be seen, waiting to be enough, just as she is. You molded yourself to be agreeable, to be needed, to be chosen. But somewhere in that process, you stopped choosing yourself. You traded authenticity for approval. You became fluent in his language, but forgot the sound of your own voice. And the hardest part? You thought this was what love required. No one told you that being useful is not the same as being valued, that being adaptable is not the same as being cherished. You believed that if you made yourself indispensable, he would never leave. But deep down, something inside you knew you were staying in a love that required the death of your spirit. So yes, the pain is real, but it's not just about losing a man. It's about realizing how far you drifted from your own soul in the name of love. You don't have to keep performing. You don't have to keep earning what you were born worthy of. There's a part of you that has always known this, a part that whispers, you are not here to be convenient. You are here to be whole. You didn't lose love. You lost a place where you had to shrink. Not everything that feels like love is love. Sometimes, it's just the place where we learn to be small, to tiptoe around tension, to swallow needs whole, to stay quiet so the other wouldn't walk away. You thought you were loved, but what if you were just tolerated in fragments? Love should feel like breath, like sunlight, like rest. But when it starts to feel like pressure, like proving, like holding your breath so they stay, you are not in love. You are in survival. You didn't lose love. You lost a space that required you to forget your fullness just to be allowed inside. A space that offered presence, but not partnership. Attention, but not attunement. You lost the place where you had to shrink to fit. And that is not a loss. That is a rescue. Real love doesn't ask you to erase your pain to be palatable. Real love doesn't get uncomfortable with your complexity. Real love doesn't disappear when you stop pretending to be easy. Clarissa Pinkola Estes wrote, "You were not made to live inside cages of approval." But many of us were taught that approval was the price for connection, that we must trade authenticity for attachment. And so we did. We wore masks so long they started to feel like skin. But even in the tightest cage, the soul remembers freedom. Even when we think we're broken, something inside us aches not for another's return, but for our own. So no, you didn't lose love. You lost the illusion that being half-loved is enough, and that illusion needed to break. Because your wholeness was never meant to be negotiated. The moment you stop trying to be remembered and choose to remember yourself, there comes a point when you're no longer waiting for his message, but for your own return. At first, you still check. You still wonder if he thinks of you. You replay the last words, search for meaning in the silence, hope for a sign that you still matter in his world, that maybe, just maybe, he regrets the leaving. But with time, something shifts. Because every moment you spend looking for him is a moment you abandon yourself. You become a ghost in your own life, haunting memories that no longer hold you. You keep reaching outward when what you truly long for is within. The question isn't, will he remember me? It's, when did I forget myself? There's a certain dignity that awakens when a woman stops chasing validation. It doesn't roar. It doesn't need to. It settles in her like a quiet knowing, a softness that no longer pleads, but chooses. She remembers who she was before she needed to be remembered by someone else. She comes home, because the hunger for someone's attention is often just the ache of her own absence. And when she turns inward, even for a moment, she meets something sacred, the part of her that was never broken, the part that doesn't need to be chosen, because it was never truly lost. The woman who stops asking, "Does he still think of me?" starts asking, "What do I think of me?" And that question changes everything. The more she remembers herself, the less she needs to be remembered by those who once overlooked her. The more she returns to her own heart, the more she sees that her worth was never waiting in someone else's eyes. It was there all along, silent beneath the noise, steady beneath the grief. This is not about forgetting him. It's about finally remembering you. The inner dialogue that rebuilds you from desperation to dignity. There are nights when the mirror feels like an enemy, when the reflection staring back is swollen from tears, hollow from exhaustion, dimmed by heartbreak. In those moments, it's tempting to look away, to avoid the truth, to believe the lie that you are less now that he's gone. But the mirror doesn't lie. It reveals. And sometimes, what it reveals is the place where your healing must begin. Because what truly changes a woman's life is not someone else's validation. It's the words she speaks to herself when no one is listening. At first, those words may tremble. They may sound like whispers barely holding themselves together. But they matter. They shape reality. They build bridges between broken pieces. They remind the heart that even in despair, there is dignity. You might look in that mirror and see pain. But try, just once, to look again and say, even through the tears, I am learning to choose myself, even when it hurts. Because that's where the shift begins. Not when the pain disappears, but when your voice starts to speak louder than your wounds. Louise Hay taught us, I love and approve of myself. She taught us that healing begins with presence, and the mirror becomes more than glass. It becomes a witness, a place where shame softens and truth begins to unfold. Not all at once, not perfectly, but with honesty. This inner dialogue, it's not about pretending you're okay. It's about showing up for yourself in the not okay. It's about replacing the loop of, why wasn't I enough for him, with a new melody. I am enough for me. And every time you do this, no matter how small, you build. You gather stones for the foundation of a self-worth that cannot be taken away. You begin to rise, not in defiance, but in quiet reverence for who you are and who you're becoming. When loneliness becomes a sacred silence, not a sentence. Loneliness has a sound. It's not always loud. Sometimes it hums like an empty room, like the pause between songs, like the moment just before tears fall. And in that stillness, it's easy to believe something is wrong with you, that because he's gone, you are somehow less. That silence means punishment, that being alone is a sentence you didn't deserve. But what if this silence isn't here to hurt you? What if it's here to hold you? There's a kind of loneliness that feels unbearable when you're still running from yourself, when the thought of sitting alone at dinner or waking up to an empty bed stings like rejection. But the deeper truth is this. It's not the absence of him that aches. It's the unfamiliar presence of you. Because when you finally stop filling your life with noise, calls, messages, distractions, you start hearing your own soul. And at first, that can be terrifying. But over time, it becomes sacred. A space where healing speaks. A space where the ache softens into awareness. This is not exile. This is a return. Being alone is not a deficiency. It's a doorway. A place where you no longer have to perform, explain, justify, or chase. A place where your body exhales fully for the first time in years. Where you can cry without hiding. Where you can rediscover the rhythm of your breath, the pace of your heart, the truth of your essence. So if the nights feel long, if the silence feels heavy, know this. You're not being punished. You're being purified. The noise has cleared so you can finally hear yourself again. The space he left was never meant to be filled with someone else. It was always meant for your return. Alone is not absence. Alone is presence. Alone is not a cage. Alone is a cradle. Story. The woman who stopped waiting to be wanted. She waited. Through birthdays, through holidays, through silent nights and unanswered messages. She waited with hope, with justifications, with the belief that if she loved him enough, he would come back. That if she stayed available, if she stayed soft, if she stayed forgiving, one day he would see her again, really see her. Years passed, and every time he came back, it was just for a moment, a text at midnight, a whisper of regret, a breadcrumb, enough to reignite her hope, but never enough to feed her soul. She built her days around the possibility of being remembered. Her heart became a waiting room, but something shifted, not all at once, not with anger, with clarity. One morning, she woke up and realized she wasn't actually waiting for him. She was waiting for herself, for the part of her that stopped dancing, stopped laughing, stopped dreaming. For the woman she left behind the day, she decided someone else's love was more important than her own life. And that was the day she stopped chasing, not out of bitterness, out of reverence, because she finally saw that it was never about him. It was about the love she withheld from herself. The attention she craved from his eyes was a reflection of the gaze she refused to give her own soul. She planted new rituals. She cried without apology. She looked in the mirror and said the name she'd forgotten, her own, and in that quiet reclamation, something bloomed. Not a new man, not a new romance, but a woman, alive, awake, whole. The day she stopped waiting to be wanted was the day she became undeniable, the feminine rebirth, becoming the woman you were before the fear, before the heartbreak, before the silence, before the moment you felt replaced or forgotten. There was a woman. She wasn't perfect, but she was alive. She laughed louder. She walked lighter. She trusted her heart even when it trembled. She hadn't yet been taught that love required sacrifice. She hadn't yet learned to doubt her worth. That woman still exists. She is not lost. She is buried beneath the weight of who you tried to become for someone else, beneath the roles you played, the wounds you carried, the fears you swallowed whole. And every tear you've cried is not weakness. It's water loosening the soil around your own rebirth. Because the woman you are becoming will cost you the woman who waited, the one who stayed silent, the one who feared being too much, too emotional, too inconvenient. This is the becoming, not polished, not neat, but sacred. Louise Hay once said, "I am in the process of becoming the best version of myself. Not the most loved, not the most desired, but the most whole, the most real, the most deeply anchored in her own truth." There is grief in this process, but there is also gold. Because when a woman rises from the ashes of who she thought she had to be, she becomes something unshakable. She no longer begs for space. She takes up space. She no longer waits to be rescued. She learned she was never broken. Before the fear, she was free. Before the shame, she was radiant. Before the loss, she was full of life. And now, she returns. You didn't lose a man. You found a mirror. There's a moment, after the storm, after the ache, after the long nights curled into yourself, when you begin to see things differently, not because the pain vanished, but because something deeper emerged through it. A new clarity, a quiet strength, a gentleness that no longer begs, but breathes. You realize it was never just about him. It was about the parts of you that surfaced through the breaking, the woman you met in the mirror, after all the dust settled, the one who held you through the nights no one else saw, the one who whispered truth into the silence. You didn't lose a man. You found a mirror. Louise Hay taught, "Every experience is a stepping stone to my healing, and some stepping stones are jagged. Some draw blood, but they all lead somewhere sacred, if you dare to walk them with presence." Clarissa Pinkola Estes writes, "Go out and let stories happen to you, and you'll live them." This was never just a breakup. It was a myth being written through your heartbeat, a story of descent and return, of forgetting and remembering, of burning and blooming. There's a mirror inside you that has waited years to be cleaned, not the mirror of appearance, but the mirror of essence, the one that reflects not how the world sees you, but how your soul recognizes itself. So now, maybe the question isn't, why did he leave? Maybe it's, why did I leave myself for so long? And maybe, just maybe, that question is the doorway to everything you've been seeking. Because this is not the end of you. This is the beginning of your unshakable becoming. So, if you felt held by these words, if something inside you softened, breathed, remembered, stay close. This space is for you. Subscribe and keep walking this path of healing, of truth, of deep feminine wisdom. And now, I invite you to click on the video that just appeared on your screen. It's a continuation of this journey, a gentle hand guiding you deeper into your own wholeness. You don't have to do this alone. Your rebirth is just beginning.